Hi everyone. So I'm on my way to charge up the car. I have had to go out for work today and I'm not that far away from my usual charging location, the BP Pulse in Ashington. It's one of the only 150 kilowatt chargers near to where I work and where I live. So it's a really useful charger to go to when I need to charge up and if I'm out doing an important, like an essential journey at the moment. The problem though with this BP Pulse is it doesn't show you the charging speed on the display. So unfortunately, that's a bit of a downside. So it's hard to get really accurate numbers, but it's the charger that I have available to me. So I'm going to go and do another charging session on this charger. And this time it's warmer and I've got the latest software update installed in the car. So we'll see what kind of speeds I manage to get and if it's any better than previous charging attempts at this particular location. So yeah, if you haven't already liked or subscribed, please do so down below. It really helps to boost the channel and to boost these videos, helping me to make more of them in the future. So just a couple of things that I wanted to mention before I start charging. The latest software update that Polestar released over the air, I did a separate video about that if you haven't already seen it, but it's really nice to have these over the air updates now working on the Polestar. And one of the key issues in this update is the improvement to some of the charging speeds. Now, some of the tests that the guys in Norway have done, Bjorn and Chris, been really interesting to see that they've managed to get slightly higher charging speeds, both peak speeds and also the average time and charging speed that you get over the whole charging cycle. So what I want to see today is whether I can get a higher peak speed and also get basically a faster charging speed from 10 to 80%. So what Polestar have technically done is, I believe, upped the maximum speed within the battery to 155 kilowatts, and they've tweaked the charging curve. So in theory, you should be able to get up to 80% a little bit quicker than you could before. And one of the frustrations with this car is that it was very difficult to reach 150 kilowatts unless you had the battery at exactly the right warmed up temperature. Really frustrating. And many manufacturers do this. They give you the theoretical peak that you can charge to, not the realistic real world number. So cars like the Audi e-tron are very good at charging at 150 kilowatts for a sustained period within the charging cycle, making them actually really quick to charge. The range might not be that great, but you don't have to spend much time at a charger to get back up to 80%. The Polestar has a very small window, it seems, where you can hit your peak charging speed. But still, what it proves really is that they can do software updates that can release extra capabilities of these batteries, which is something really interesting, and it's a very fascinating thing about the technology and the way that it can change in the future. So on my way over to the charging point, I'm going to try and warm the car up a little bit. Now, I know that for a lot of people this seems like a fairly pointless thing to do, because who in the real world is going to do that? Teslas, they can preheat their batteries, and that's great. Polestar, it doesn't do that. But what you can do is some yo-yo driving, which is accelerate, slow down, gets a bit of heat into the battery. But in this particular case, what it kind of does is imitates what it might be like after you've driven for a few hours and your car is actually warmed up. Because I'm local to work and I had to be out for work, I actually haven't driven that far. So I want to try and warm the car up a little bit more to try and imitate what it would be like in a real world scenario where you've driven for 2.5 hours and then you've plugged into charge. So yeah, let's do a little bit of that yo-yo driving and we will get charging as soon as I get to the BP Pulse. Okay, so we're charging up now and plugged in, and yeah, 10% is exactly what I got here with. So I'll set the charge limit to 80% and we'll see how long this takes, monitor the charge as it goes. Now, one thing that always gets on my nerves, and you can see here on the screen, this really bothers me. I am plugged in and charging and this warning comes up. It does this all the time. Low range, do you want to find a charging station? Well, but I'm plugged in and charging. It should know. So yeah, I hope Polestar fix that with an update. So yeah, I'll select no. But here we go. So we're at 11%, 206 miles per hour. Now I'm going to have to do my usual trick, which is use about 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour as a way of sort of calculating back. And then what we'll do at the end of the charging cycle, we'll be able to look at the average time taken to reach the charge. Okay, so we've reached 20% and we are getting 301 miles per hour. That on the basis of 2.6, that works out at about 115. So yeah, a nice solid, fairly fast charge speed at the moment. Okay, so we've reached 30% now, and the charging speed has dropped down to 225 miles per hour, which works out as about 86 kilowatts. So yeah, I feel like I don't really have much luck with my charging tests. Almost no matter what I do in any scenario, even with trying to heat the battery up using a trick, I still seem to max out at about 115 kilowatts. I don't expect the charge is going to increase in speed now, because normally we get in the Polestar the best charging speed at a lower percentage. Maybe I might get slightly better results if I took the battery down to say 5% before I started these charges. But yes, that's an interesting topic for discussion, because how low are people comfortable with going? I mean, yeah, I probably would go down to 5% now. I mean, I'm kind of used to driving the car. I've done 5,000 miles. I've done a few journeys where I have taken it down to sort of 5% before charging. But would I recommend it to people? No, probably not. Like, if you're going on a long drive, you don't really want to be getting to your destination with 3 to 5%. You kind of want to have a little bit of contingency just in case. I mean, if you're going somewhere that you're familiar with, where you know there's lots of charging units, you're not going to get stuck in a situation where you're traveling to just a single charger, then maybe that's okay to take that risk. But for me at the moment, I feel like 10 to 80% is kind of the lowest I want to go. But we'll see how it goes with the rest of the charging cycle. Okay, so we got an error message here. Battery level 36%. Reconnect. Okay, never seen this one before. So let's hop out, reconnect, and see what happens. Okay, so I had to connect to the other charger. It seemed like that was a little strange. I've not seen that before, that error message come up. I tried to reactivate the charge using the same unit, but it didn't work. So I've moved over to the other charger. But you know, this is perfect, because this is a great example of how frustrating it can be, and exactly what I was actually trying to say while I was filming. But basically, the thing with the charging network in the UK right now is that you have to be quite careful where you go. And this is not the way it should be. Basically, I wouldn't want to plan a long journey anywhere in the UK unless I knew I was going to stop at locations that had 2 chargers or more. Now, the reason for this is you just simply can't trust it if there's a single charger. And most of the chargers that you find on the BP Pulse or Shell network are single units. If you go to a Shell garage with just one of these chargers and you plug in and you find it fails and it just happens to stop working when you get there, where are you going to go as a contingency? If there are multiple options around the area, then fine, that's no big deal. But if there aren't, you really don't want to get there with a low state of charge, because if you arrive with 5% and you have nowhere else to go, then you could be in a difficult situation. Now, the good thing is, the positive side of this is that there are more and more networks that are installing multiple chargers. So this one, for example, has 2 units, and that means that there is another one to switch to if one of them breaks or if the other one is occupied. And InstaVolt is a good example of a network installing multiple locations, and GridServe, with their new partnership with Ecotricity, are going to be doing the same. And we need to see more of this, and it will come. I mean, give it a few years and there'll be multiple chargers in most locations, I'm sure. But at the moment, my advice to anyone planning longer trips is don't do it via single charging units, because if it goes wrong, you might find yourself in a position to not be able to find somewhere quick and convenient to charge. So we've reached 40% and we are getting 284 miles per hour. So one thing I want to show you is a really useful way to plan a route if you are planning to go on a longer distance drive and you want to know at what percentage you need to be at to go on to the next location. So have a look at the screen here. Say, for example, I was driving somewhere north, say to Edinburgh, and I wanted to charge up at the first location. You can have a look on the screen and find somewhere that you'd like to charge, or maybe use something like ZapMap. But now I found my first charging point, and I'm thinking I'm going to stop here in Milton Keynes. So let's say it's this BP Pulse, and it says right now that I'm going to arrive there with 0%. So I've got 103 miles that I need to be able to do that drive. Now, if I look over here at this display, it says that my range is 110 miles. So you can immediately see the mismatch there that doesn't really make sense. Now the issue is that the car estimates the range on this display based on a very simple set of numbers, whereas the Google Maps system bases it on the actual road that you want to drive on and is very accurate. So if you're trying to figure out a route, I would always use Google Maps. Now we'll check back in a minute to see what it says, because that 0% will start to increase as soon as it gets to a point where it has enough charge. So what you can do is you can put in the location that you want to travel to, leave that on the screen, and then as the car charges up, you will start to see that increase. And when that gets to a comfortable number, that's when you can stop the charge and head off. So in this case, 103 miles, I think that's probably going to be good to go at around 60%. If that's what I wanted to do and that was going to be my first stop, there's little point in staying here till you get to 80% unless you have something that you need to do. What I would do is get to a point where it says 10% remaining and probably stop the charge and head off at that time, and then I'll get there with exactly the right amount of charge to take advantage of the fastest possible charging speed. Okay, we've reached 50% and it's dropped down to 197, so yeah, it's throttled back quite a bit now. Okay, so now you can see exactly what I was saying. So we have reached a battery level of 54%, it says there on the screen. And now on here, the displayed arrival time has increased to 5%, which you can see down here in the red. So that will just go up as the battery keeps charging, and you'll get to a point when you sort of think, okay, maybe 10%, and I will head off. So another useful trick is to do this. So say, for example, we want to go to Edinburgh. Let's pop that in there, and it's going to load up. So let's see, add charging stop, and let's see what kind of thing it comes up with. Okay, so charging stop number 1 looks a bit pointless because that's really close. I'd probably charge up a bit more. Charging point number 2, I actually think probably is around where I wanted to go. So what about charging point number 3? What's this up here? So let's see. So where's that? It's 2 Tallies End. So let's try entering that on its own. 2 Tallies End. Right, so let's see. Charge point. Two Tallies. There we go. So if we pop that in, just straight there, that's saying that's 199 miles. So that's 200 miles. So I don't think we're going to quite make that. But again, this is something that you can get an idea from this if you were able to skip a charging stop. So it's probably not worth it to try and charge up to 100%. But my point here is that this is always assuming that you're going to leave straight away, and you might not want to do that. You could be doing this, for example, at home and be plugged in, charging up, waiting to get to 100%, in which case you might look at it and go, okay, I could stretch that and maybe skip out the first couple of stops. So looking ahead is a really useful way of trying to figure out how you could plan your journey depending on how high you'd like the charge to go. Okay, 60% and showing 168 miles per hour. Yeah, it's getting a little slower as we increase through the charging range. 70% and we are at 172 miles per hour. Okay, so we are approaching 80% now. We've slowed down to 150 on the charge speed. It'll stop at 80%. And I just wanted to show you one more. Now that we're at a good charging percentage, up to 80%, I found this one. So if I type in Instavolt, that's a good network. It's not the cheapest, but it's reliable. And let's go with this one. It's called Orton Gate near Peterborough. So this is a good example of how on 80% where you could actually go. So you get there with 13%, which is almost exactly right. It's 140 miles and it's saying 2 hours and 32 minutes. Now, if you were able to drive at 70 miles an hour the entire way, you probably get there in a couple of hours. But you know what? UK roads are not like that. So it's unlikely you'll be able to make it that quickly. But this is a good reason why you don't necessarily need a lot of range in an electric car. The Polestar it's on the limit. Like, it might not be enough for many people, but for me it's fine, because 2.5 hours is the longest I would want to drive. I don't really like driving very far because I always need the toilet. So this is about perfect for me. 2 hours and 32 minutes. We've charged up to 80%. We're about to stop and we would get there with 13%, be able to have a coffee and charge up again and head off once we reach 80%. So this is a good example of how, you know, driving in the UK, typical 2.5 hour type of drive that you would get for 80% down to 10% and then carry on to your next stopping point. Okay, so we're finished charging now and we've reached 80%. Basically that took me about 40 minutes to go from 10 to 80%. So that's not too bad, considering I actually had to move charging units as well. Now, the average on that charging cycle, we got 57.5 kilowatt hours over 41 minutes, and that is 84 kilowatts. Now, let's see, in my notes, is that any better? I think I was averaging around 70. So 84 is actually pretty decent. And I think it could have been a lot better because, as I said earlier, I did not hit a peak charge of 150. I think maybe I've just been unlucky. I don't know if it's the chargers I've used, but I have yet to hit 150 kilowatts in my car, even with the yo-yo driving to warm up the battery. However, what is really positive about that is the average charging speed. 84 kilowatts is really good, and that brings it closer to what I actually got on the Tesla on these particular chargers. Now, okay, to be fair to Tesla, I hadn't warmed the battery up, so I had to actually do some yo-yo driving on the Polestar. So, you know, that's not a fair comparison. But my point here is that Polestar have definitely done something, and it is a faster average charging speed, which is what matters quite significantly, and I think I probably could get better results at some point in the future. 40 minutes is not too bad either, 10 to 80%. And as I said when I was showing you the map display, that's 40 minutes to then be able to go 2.5 hours to the next charging stop, and perhaps stop there for another 40 minutes and then carry on to the next one. So yeah, it's not a bad result, to be honest, and I am pleased to see slightly increased average charging speeds across the curve. It does also help that it's warmed up. My temperature display is showing 18 degrees now. Okay, I am sat in the sun, so that's probably a bit higher than it is in reality. But I think in summer we are going to see slightly better charging speeds, which is really nice, and I'm very pleased that Polestar have done something already. The car hasn't been out very long, and it's nice to see an over-the update that has addressed some of those charging issues. Even if it is a small bonus, it's still something positive nonetheless. So I hope this video has been helpful. Another one of my many charging videos in the Polestar, and I'll be back again with another video very soon. Thank you. Okay, so if you've made it this far into the video, this is just a little bit of an add-on at the end about the range. Over the last few days, the weather has been a bit warmer, and since the software update, I've seen some slightly better numbers in terms of range, but today is probably the best I've actually seen in all of the driving. I did 45 miles, and you can see here on the display 33.4 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. Now, it was a mixture of driving. Some of this was on the dual carriageway at 70 miles an hour, some of it was through town, some of it was cross-country. So rarely mixed driving, but I wasn't being conservative in the way I was driving at all. And that 33.5 on the basis of 72.5 total battery gives a range of about 217 miles. So starting to see some nice improvements, especially with the weather warming up a little bit, and hopefully that'll get even better in the summer. Now on the left hand side there, you can see of my trip manual data there, 732 miles, showing 37.8. Now 72.5 divided by 37.8 gives 192 miles. That is mainly short drives. It's a big mixture of stuff, but it has been quite cold over the last few weeks. So yeah, I would say that's probably an average for my last 3 weeks worth of driving, but really nice to see good consumption numbers from today with a temperature of around 12-14 degrees and a slightly warmer battery too.